All right. Well, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to your every other Friday legislative update here at WASAC. We've got a good update for you today. There's been a lot of progress in the legislature over the last couple of weeks since we last met. So we're going to go ahead and just jump right into it. Just give you a reminder of what we're here to talk about. We're just here to give you an update on what's going on in the 2024 legislative session. We're going to hit on some important bills. We're going to hit on budgets today. So lots of good stuff to talk about. Excuse me. By the time you get done with this 1 hour or less meeting, which is probably the fastest legislative update in Olympia going, you'll have all the bragging rights for everybody in your office. You'll be the one who's in the know. So let's just jump right into it. Today is day 47 of 60. And of course, it wouldn't be a WASAC legislative update if I didn't say we don't count the days at WASAC. We make the days count, but we do want you to know what day we are on in the legislative session. Less than 2 weeks to go. The sine die is coming up Thursday from next Thursday. So we are really getting down to the wire. Monday, the 26th. So Monday, 3 days from now, is the opposite house fiscal cutoff. That's a really important pivotal day. Bills that were in one chamber and moved to the other chamber, so bills that started in the House and made it through the process and went to the Senate, they have to be out of their fiscal committees no later than 5 o'clock on Monday in order to be considered still alive for the session. We had the policy committee up cut off on Wednesday of this week, if I'm not mistaken. So the timeframes are getting shorter, they're getting much tighter, and we're getting down to the wire. The cutoffs are coming fast and furious. We did see the release of the budgets since the last time we talked. They started coming out last Friday with the Senate capital budget. The Senate operating budget proposal came out on Sunday afternoon, and then we saw the rest of the budgets drop on Monday, both the House capital and operating and the transportation budget. So all of those budgets are out. We have completed our budget analysis on our spreadsheet form, and that is up and live as of this morning on our website. We have also completed our budget comment letters to the different budget writers and sent those out this morning as well. LLC will get copies of those on Thursday. If anybody else wants copies of those, please let me know. Now, will your bill survive? Well, you're about to hear some information on that. So let's just jump right into it with Mike Hoover. Mike, are you with us?
I am. Yeah, thank you. I only have two bills to really talk about because everything else is dead, and that's mostly good in my case. So I'm in pretty good shape. So nobody touch anything is kind of kind of what I'm saying down there. But two bills that I will go over, one of which you've heard me talk about before. One is new to this group, and I'll explain why that is. Even Your Elections is up today. This is a bill that we've been watching. This is not a mandatory thing. This is a discretionary. It is a bill that would let you, if you chose, or other jurisdictions, if they chose, move certain elections to the even year. We do still have concerns about it. The Secretary of State has concerns about it. The auditors have concerns about it. They actually are all testifying no, I believe, unless they've changed, because there are all kinds of logistical problems. There are reasons why switching an election is not quite as easy as just picking the year you want. There's all kinds of things relating to the equipment, the software, the voters' pamphlets. There's reasons that people do things when to get ready for a package for a bond. All that kind of stuff could make you want to do an odd year election. And generally, the concern is that they're afraid that even though no pun intended, even though even year is not a mandate yet, if we pass this, eventually it will be a mandate. And to be fair, I've seen the legislature do that. You probably have too. So that's the concern. Don't know if it's going to keep going, but it's moving now. We did, like I say, get it discretionary. It's not a mandate. It is at least discretionary. Our two issues have been to keep it discretionary, make sure it works. I guess three. And the third thing is make sure it's paid for. And so far, so good, but we'll keep you updated. The next bill is a bill I have not talked about because until recently I was following it, but I wasn't sure how much it would impact us as opposed to the private sector. This would provide unemployment benefits for striking workers, meaning workers that chose to strike or participate in some slowdown or something like that. If they were not at work, lockout, striking, whatever, they could get unemployment benefits for that time period. This obviously would hit the private sector fairly hard, but it was unclear whether it would hit schools, counties, cities, things like that because of the difference in the legality of when and how some of our employees may strike. So we kind of stayed out of it. But very recently, at the last time, the last hearing, and now they're not going to have any more hearings. It's already out of the House and gone to the Senate and about to go to the Senate floor. They added a line in there that says that we would have to pay, and at least until there was a court order saying that a strike was illegal. So people could strike and we would have to pay unemployment benefits, and we'd be on the hook for that at least until we got a final court judgment. And at that point, from that point on, we would not have to pay, but nobody would necessarily have to pay us back. And it's kind of a backdoor way of getting in, making the strike a little more legal for classes of people that perhaps it is not legal for, is the concern. I'm not trying to get too technical about that, but we follow these kinds of things because there teachers in particular, some of our classes of employees are not, we believe, allowed to strike because there are public safety concerns or other concerns. There were trade-offs made with collective bargaining, et cetera, et cetera. So if you then say, well, they can get unemployment benefits if they strike, it certainly appears that you are blessing the strike on some legal sense. So we are following that. We are trying to get that language changed. As I say, it was added at literally the 11th hour. And so after all of the testimony had been heard, every opportunity to testify in the bill had gone, they put it in a striker at the end. So we're working on it, but it is a very big priority for a lot of folks, and it is a bill that is still moving at this point. And I see at least one question.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. We'll go ahead and open it up for questions. I see Commissioner Swanek.
So, Mike, I was wondering on this bill, how would it not be a gifting of public funds if somebody is striking of their own volition and then we're paying them government dollars while they're on strike?
Well, I suspect that could be an issue, but it will be one that, at least under this, it would have to be resolved in the courts. We would have to pay, and if we were to prevail, if a strike was found illegal at that point, we would not pay benefits back, or we would not pay benefits from that point on. But so far as I know, there is no way to recoup paid benefits under this. So one of the open legal questions is what you just asked. Yes.
Yeah, the bill in its entirety was what that one was running across in my mind. Thank you.
Other questions? Okay, Mike, you'll stick around for a little bit in case questions pop up?
I will. Thank you.
Thank you for your report. Let's move on to Juliana.
Hi, everyone. So the first bill on your list there is 5780. This is the Public Defense and Prosecutor Internships Bill. Right now, it is not scheduled for a hearing in the House. And so if it does not get scheduled for a hearing today, it will die this weekend. So if you have any sway over anyone on the Appropriations Committee, reach out to them. We have done that already. And I know some of you have already as well. 6242 is Senator Mullet's bill that covers the full costs of BLEA training at the CJTC. This bill is moving along. Actually, I want to kind of check that while I'm sitting here. Oh, I don't have it open. I do believe that it is in a budget committee, so it has a little time to get out. It has extra few days to have a hearing and be exec'd out, but it was also included in the Senate budget, fully funded, so that is positive. Today, this afternoon, 2065 is being heard in Senate Ways and Means. This is the one and only remaining resentencing bill, which is good because there were many this year, but it's bad because this is going to cost us a significant amount of money. As you know, if a bill costs money, it's supposed to be included in the operating budget from which House that bill comes from. So this came out of the House. It should have been included in the House's budget. They only included funding for the state portion of that. And so sorry, I'm getting distracted by Eric's messages.
I'm just suggesting that you just don't use the acronyms.
Yeah, 2065. So we will be testifying in opposition to this bill, speaking specifically to the local government costs. In speaking with prosecutors, we're thinking that this is going to cost us upwards of $10 million a year. So this is a very expensive bill for us. As for budgets, there were some interesting things that I was not expecting in the jail rate increase. So that's for the Department of Corrections beds that when DOC, Department of Corrections, sends someone to your county jail, they have a specific bed rate that they pay, which is generally lower than what you hope for. And so the Senate includes an immediate jail rate increase, whereas the House includes just a study on bed rates. And so we've asked in our letter for inclusion of both of those in both. The Blake proviso was included in both bills. That's the proviso that I discussed with LSC a couple of weeks ago, based on conversations we had with the Office of Public Defense. They reached out to us and asked if, Eric, you have to stop. I have to turn this off. They reached out to us and asked if it might be beneficial to allow counties to allow the AOC, which is the Administrative Office of the Courts, to take on the vacate cases that were from the Blake decision and be reimbursed directly rather than having counties do them and then having counties be reimbursed for that same service. And I think this is a positive step forward for both. And if a county wants to keep doing their vacates, they can. If they don't, then they can contract with AOC to do that. Correction Officer Academy, if you recall, the Criminal Justice Training Commission is asking for an increase in the number of Correction Officer Academy classes. They asked for, I think, a total of 5 over the next 2 years in addition to what they currently have, and only 3 were included in both the House, Senate budgets and the governor's. We have been working on getting more classes than that. We actually need something like 1 additional class in 24 and 9 additional classes in 25. So that would be 13 available classes in 25. It sounds as though a Senate amendment will be accepted by Representative Ormsby that would allow for that. The only piece that he had us take out was any carry forward, so that these were not ongoing costs for the legislature. So if we do get those additional classes that we're requesting, that would get rid of the current backlog and get us back to even, which would be really positive. And so, if you want to reach out to your legislators and tell them that you're supportive of this, that'd be great. And then I was just going to point out that the 90-day authorization for the 1115 waiver was included in both budgets. So that's good. So they've approved that. And then, this last bullet is a little more complicated. And if you have questions, please reach out to me. But basically, this is a developmental disabilities issue. Counties contract with people to provide employment and community inclusion services. We've been trying for years to get the rate increased, and we've been trying to use the current, what they call the underspend at DDA, to allow for these rates to be increased. The legislature and the governor's office keep saying that they will not increase those rates with the underspend, but they also won't tell us what the underspend is doing. And this underspend is specifically for these services. So in the House budget, they are sweeping $35 million of underspend that should really be used for an increase in the rates. So this is something that we're trying to work on. And if you are interested in this, please reach out to me. And with that, I'll end and I'll look at the chat from Eric.
Thanks, Juliana. Any questions for Juliana? Commissioner Ozias, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. Juliana, do we know where those dollars are being swept to? Is it just to the general fund or it would be to a specific other program?
Sorry, we
Juliana,
don't really know.
there you go.
We are trying, part of us thinks that they're going to use it within DDA for different programs, which they shouldn't be doing because this money was specifically for these programs. But we're not exactly sure.
Gotcha. Okay, thanks.
Mhm.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, Juliana, you'll stick around in case something pops up. Thank you. All right, let's move on. Next item is land use, natural resources, and environment. That is my issue area. So I will give you these updates. The first one on the list there is House Bill 1468. This is a bill that we tagged as dead, that actually popped back up really quite suddenly out of rules and was voted off of the House floor. It was a bill that we were tracking last year that had to do with impact fee deferrals. As you probably know, you are required to have an impact fee deferral program if you charge impact fees as part of your building and development permitting system. There's a couple of different ways or a couple of different timeframes that developers and builders can delay their impact fees. Number one would be until the certificate of occupancy is issued. Number two would be upon the last inspection. And the third one, mostly for development, is upon the first sale of the first lot of the development. The original bill actually just removed the option for the first sale of the first lot and also removed some reporting options because of a JLARC report that had been filed that took a look at these impact fee deferral programs and how they were operating. However, when it came out of the House, there was a striking amendment that not only put that back, but also changed your ability to place a lien on the property for unpaid impact fees through the deferral program and required you to use promissory notes. We didn't like those changes. We don't feel like the promissory notes, while they are contracts, are as enforceable, obviously, as a lien on the property. And there was some question as to whether or not a promissory note would actually be a violation of the gifting of public funds and the lending of public credit prohibitions in the state constitution. So we've been working with the stakeholders who drafted that striking amendment to try to come up with some language that we could agree to, but we've been unsuccessful so far. At this point, it doesn't look like this bill is going to move forward, and we have gotten an assurance from the Senate that they will not move it unless there is language that's agreed to by all the stakeholders, and us, along with I think the school districts, so far have not been able to come with we haven't found agreement with some of the language that's been proposed. We've offered some alternatives, and the builders and others have not accepted those alternatives. So right now we're at a stalemate, and hopefully this bill will not move forward in its current form. At this point, I don't expect it to. Next one on the list is House Bill 1998. This is the bill that would require you to permit co-living housing anywhere where multifamily housing that allows 6 units or more on a lot is currently allowed. This bill has moved through the process. It's out of the House and onto the Senate. It's now off the Senate floor, but it was amended. So the House version was amended. So it will need to go into concurrence. Unfortunately, while we are pretty supportive of the bill from a policy perspective, the House budget decided not to fund local government costs associated with this bill. And if it does pass, it will be an unfunded mandate. So this is the very first one in the land use side that we've seen that it hasn't been funded, along with a couple of others, but the first one that we tagged. We have let the budget writers know, and we'll see what actually comes out in the final budgets, but it's not looking good so far. The next bill on the list is House Bill 2071. This is another housing bill. This is the one that has to do with buildings that would be redeveloped into housing from some other previous purpose, and new construction for residential housing that would use passive house building requirements, so more energy efficient, et cetera. This is the bill that allowed them to basically intrude into setbacks by about 8 inches or so. This bill, was amended. It came out of the House in a pretty good form. It was being worked in the Senate, came out of the Senate as far as the policy committee and the fiscal committees, and is sitting in rules. Unfortunately, this bill has also not been funded in the House budget proposal. We have notified the Senate to that effect. And I can see that there is a striking amendment on the bar if the bill comes out of rules by the majority party that would actually remove all of the local government obligations and therefore the costs. That's a very good sign and something we're certainly appreciative of. It's Senator Liz Lovelett, who is the chair of the committee who heard the bill, who has the striking amendment that is responsive to our concern. So we'll watch that closely to see what happens. As the budgets go into conference, it's very likely that they may decide to fund it if the bill is passed, and if that's the case, then we wouldn't have further concerns. The next bill on your list is 2348. That is the county hospital funding bill that really is intended for Harborview, but pertains to any county-owned hospitals. That bill continues to move, and it's one that we support. 5834 is the bill that allows you to swap areas of your urban growth area as long as it's essentially a net zero as far as acres or development. That bill continues to move. We heard a lot of concerns about some of the language really late in the process, but all of the groups that had those concerns have agreed to let the bill pass and to support the bill passing this year and to follow it up with a trailer bill to make any corrections in the next legislative session. So that's good news with that bill. 6120, the WUI code bill that corrects the mapping problem that's currently in place. This bill came out of the policy committee this week and is on to appropriations. It's going to be heard this afternoon, and I'll be testifying on the bill. It's also been scheduled for an executive session. So that's all very good as far as signaling on whether the bill is going to continue to move through the process. Unfortunately, we had a little bit of a kerfuffle with this bill earlier in the week where a striking amendment was put on the bar in the policy committee to actually adopt the full International Wildland Urban Interface Code as part of the bill into the state building code. That, of course, was not the intent of the bill. We were trying to fix a problem with the current portions of the International Wildland Urban Interface Code that you need to implement when the maps are properly done. We were trying to fix the mapping problem. Thankfully, we were able to talk that bill or that amendment off of the bar, and it was never offered in committee. And I think we've dealt with the issue with the State Building Code Council. They let us know that they're supportive of the bill moving forward in its current form. So that's all good news. Next one on the list is Senate Bill 6140 that allows some new flexibility for commercial development in landmarks that are a little bit more remote, meaning they're 10 miles at least from existing urban growth areas. That bill continues to move. As far as budgets go, we'll have much more on the budgets with our Legislative Steering Committee next week, but I did want to mention a couple of things. There are some unfunded mandates, as we've mentioned, both 2071 and 1998 that are on the list there. We also noticed Senate Bill 5019 that limits your ability to impose certain off-street parking requirements for residential housing in the Senate. That bill is also unfunded, unfortunately. We have let budget writers know that as well. And then there is some money for some no-cost grants for energy audits in the Senate capital budget that reappropriates existing funds. So it's not new money, but it reappropriates $4 million of existing funds to a grant program administered by WASAC for your buildings that fall under the Tier 1 and Tier 2 requirements to conduct energy audits and to get rough order of magnitude estimates on what it would cost to bring your buildings up to meet the new performance standards that start going into effect, I think, starting in 2026 for the larger buildings. We're hoping that makes it through. If you could, send out some signaling to your delegation that you really like that provision in the Senate capital budget, we could definitely use that support. And if you want more information on that, let me know. And then finally, we did see some bills die this last couple of weeks, really this last week, all of which we had some concerns about, except for House Bill 1037, we actually didn't have concerns about. That's the Family Burial Grounds bill. But 2113 was the bill that would have required you to submit your housing elements or your housing development regulations to Commerce before you could implement them. That bill died. We were pleased to see that. House Bill 2049 was a bill that had to do with the product stewardship program for product packaging and paper products. That was a bill we were neutral on, but still had some concerns. It died. And then House Bill 2144, which was the bottle return system or the beverage container bill, that bill also died this last week. So those are not moving forward this session. That is my report. Happy to take any questions. I didn't see anything in the chat, and I don't see any hands up. So let's keep moving. Next up is Jamie with Public Health, if she's here, but I've not seen her come in yet.
I am here, Paul.
Oh, great. Hey, Jamie, good to see you. Popping in from that undisclosed location just down the hall.
Good to see you too. Sorry for joining a little bit late, but we're going to jump right into some of the policy updates for public health. An update on 5983 that was passed out of House Healthcare with an amendment clarifying telemedicine as audio or video technology, which makes the bill better and simplifies it and simplifies treatment. It's now in rules on waiting a House floor poll, which we hope to see. And then 6110, our child fatality review bill, that was heard Tuesday in House Human Services and then voted out of executive committee on Wednesday with an amendment that essentially reverted it back to how it was at the Senate Ways and Means, how it was voted out of the Senate Ways and Means Committee, if that makes sense. So that bill, we were expecting it to be assigned to appropriations because it was assigned to Senate Ways and Means after committees, but it wasn't. It was sent straight to rules. So that bill is also in rules, waiting for a floor poll as well. So both those bills are in really good shape. And then just briefly, House Bill 1608, that shouldn't be 1608, that should be 1956, my bad. House Bill 2112, 2396, 5804, those are all variations of opioid prevention bills. 1956, 2112, and 5804 are all being heard in fiscal committees today and tomorrow. And then 2396, I believe it has already been heard and is waiting. My guess is that the components from 2396 might be folded into 1956 and further enhancing 1956. I'll provide requirements around opioid education for certain populations, and then 2112 and 5804 go a bit farther and also providing naloxone and additional requirements in terms of education curriculum. Moving on to budget. Some quick budget highlights. Septage, our septage capacity study was fully funded in the House at our $250,000 request, but was only included in the House. It was not in the Senate budget. And then the exact opposite happened with the school rule budget proviso that we had. So the school rule was funded in the Senate, not fully funded, but funded in a way that got the process going. So funding analysis for the rulemaking process was funded, which we are okay with. It's the first step in implementing and updating school environmental health rules. So we're good with it. But it was also only funded in the Senate, not the House. So we are working to inform both of the chambers of the opposite side on the different funding gaps for those two things. And then opioids. There are a lot of opioid investments in both budgets. And a lot of that is in addition and above what was included in the governor's budget. A lot of that has to do with the additional opioid settlements that have come through since the governor has published his budget. So both chambers had more funding to apply to opioid response work, and they used that. Some highlights for that, a lot of investment from both chambers around education, awareness, prevention, education. Both funded that at the state level. The House provided additional funding for local governments to seek out additional funding for localized opioid education campaigns. Both chambers funded increased and expansion for health engagement hubs. That is a strategy that is focused on treatment, but also provides additional comprehensive care like social supports, other medical care as part of that hub model. Both budgets included expansion of outreach and medical outreach for treatment, targeting homeless populations and encampments. The House had a really robust robust funding around harm reduction strategies, specifically naloxone access and distribution, targeting first responders like fire, EMT, law enforcement, as well as schools, as well as just making it more widely accessible for the public, as well as fentanyl test strips. Additional funding, the House budget included a data dashboard to the Department of Health for enhanced opioid data surveillance, as well as developing a public-facing dashboard, and a lot of additional treatment investments around treatment access, but also capital budget accesses around increased treatment facilities. So both budgets very robust in terms of opioid response and developing a more comprehensive opioid package. There's differences between each budget, but overall, I think there will be some robust funding in the final budget that we'll see around opioids. And Paul, that's all I got.
Thanks, Jamie. Any questions for Jamie? Okay, you'll stick around for a few minutes in case folks have questions later. Thanks, Jamie. All right, Axel, Transportation and Public Works.
Thank you, Paul. Good afternoon, everybody. Good to see you here. I want to just start with an apology for a few of you I saw jump on who are already at a meeting with either Public Works officials or the administrators groups this week, because my report is going to be fairly repetitive. So starting at the top, we'll do a couple of updates on some policy bills that are still there. And then I'll go through an update on where the capital and transportation budgets are at this point. So 2384, probably the biggest policy bill that we're still really following and tracking. I've talked about it each time we've met. That is the automated traffic safety cameras bill. So this bill would give new expanded authority to counties as a local option. So it's a local option, something you can now utilize this technology to try to reduce speeding and decrease accidents and actually raise some revenue for transportation safety projects. I changed this. We have been in support of this bill from the beginning. It says concerns today because there was a striking amendment. So the bill, as it's gone along, has changed. There was a striking amendment that was passed on the floor, and it had some new requirements in it, but it included some things we liked. So the bill has changed. It includes now work zones. So that was some added authority we asked for and is included in the current version of the bill. And then once it came off the House floor and it was heard in Senate Transportation last week, one thing we've been talking about the whole time is the bill kind of had this strange thing where it tied the infraction fee to your parking ordinance and your parking infraction fee. And many jurisdictions don't have a parking ordinance or parking fee. So we kept asking for that to be changed to something more practical. It was in the latest striker that we saw, it's been just changed to a $145 capped flat fee. So that was also good. The reason we are with concerns right now, and this bill is being worked on probably as we speak, and we expect we might see it for executive session in Senate Transportation on Monday. It was scheduled for yesterday, but was pulled because there was some language in the most current striker. Now you've got to go back. Cities have had authority around red light cameras and school zones for some time. And what you could utilize that revenue on, the definition of what you could utilize that revenue to pay for was more broad than the current definition. Currently, if you utilize these cameras, the fee needs to go to specific capital traffic safety projects. And so the latest bill had some language in it that said after 2025, all the revenue, even the previous revenue collected from programs and implemented before this bill, needed to shift to that new definition. And I think that caused some concerns, particularly with our colleagues at the cities that have ongoing programs. So they're trying to work on this bill. It's a pretty big bill. It's complicated. It's got a lot of things included in it. So we'll see what happens. But like I said, I think next step is likely see it possibly on Monday in Senate Transportation for executive session. 6040 was heard this morning in the House capital budget. So I put neutral on there. That's one of the last procurement bills we're really tracking. This was the prompt pay bill. The goal of this bill we agree with. It's to pay subcontractors promptly, specifically certified minority and women-owned businesses. And so the initial concerns we had with this bill were it didn't really say who had to provide the prompt payment. And so when it first showed up in committee, we weighed in other with concerns because typically we wouldn't be able to pay the subcontractor. We only have a contractual relationship with a prime contractor. It also didn't do a good job of defining what acceptance meant in the bill as to when the clock started for when the subcontractors needed to be paid. So we kind of worked through those issues. And in fact, the current version, we don't believe implicates or involves local jurisdictions anymore. It says right at the beginning, the state must pay. So I'm not sure. We checked in with MRSC, but we don't think in the current version of the bill we're involved anymore. But we are tracking it because we do expect this. We're going to work on this in the interim likely, and so we're still following it. It was heard this morning. I'm not sure if it will move. It may still go over to CPARB. Eric's going to ask me to say Capital Projects Advisory Review Board, CPARB. Because they weighed in and have been weighing in, and I think that would be a place if this bill doesn't pass, prompt pay could be worked on there. So that's 6040. I'll mention it's not on my list. There was another bill heard this morning in capital budget right after that. We're kind of following that bill number, if you want it, is 6192. Has to do with change orders, and it's very similar in the sense of it has to do with timelines for when change orders must be paid. It's mostly on the private contract side, but we are following that because I'll just admit, I think some of the language is at least confusing enough that we're trying to really make sure what it might mean for our contracts and our procurement process. So we are tracking at this point 6192 as well. So then there's a few bills here. 1982. Broadband loans and grants. That bill is going to be heard here in about an hour, 1:30 in Ways and Means, and so is 1870. So we're signed in support of both those bills. They'll be heard this afternoon. They're moving along pretty with unanimous support. The broadband loans and grants bill just codifies CURB's authority. Eric might have to help me with CURB. I messed that one up a lot.
Community Economic Revitalization Board.
Got it. And yeah, and you can just start logging them in, Eric. I'll throw out like FMCIB, CRAB, TIB, IIJA, WSBO, NTIA. We'll make a list of these things. So we're supportive of 1982. We're supportive of 1870. That's a good bill that will provide technical assistance and matching funds for federal grants. We've been asking a long time in different areas of the budgets. Look, hey, there's big opportunities coming our way with federal funding. Can the state set aside a pot of money so that when local jurisdictions go after competitive federal grants, we know the match is there? And then also, we've got a lot of small and rural jurisdictions that just don't have the staff capacity to kind of reach out and file that application for a competitive federal grant or maybe meet each of the requirements. So I think this is a good step in that direction. And I think I'll pause there because I saw Commissioner Sinclair's question. I'm not sure. You may still be able to sign in support of both of those. It's 12:43. I think the hearing's at 1:30, so sometimes they may let you unless you're testifying in person, but I'll leave that to have to check the website.
You can submit written comments up to, I think, maybe a day later.
Yep. So I'll pause there. If there are no questions on policy bills, I'm trying to look at my list too. Sometimes there is another policy bill I'll mention. House Bill 2022 actually just passed. It passed off the floor, I think, just as we were getting on the hearing. It was amended. This bill is a construction crane safety bill, so very important subject. Has to do with creating some new rules, requirements, permitting through labor and industry for when you're assembling and taking down a crane. the reason I mention it is there's a small section in there, obviously, that involves local jurisdictions around making sure we're doing road closures, and then some notice requirements for when that's taking place. The bill was just amended. That's what I was kind of watching for on the floor, that kind of made those notice requirements, as well as kind of the way we'll be involved and engaged in the permitting of that, I think better. So just wanted to throw that out there. That's another one we were kind of tracking later in session. And again, I'll just pause there, see if there's any questions about either the bills I mentioned or the ones that are on the page here. Okay, budgets. Start with the capital budgets. So capital budgets are in a pretty good place for us. I'll start with the best news is that the governor's proposal, the House capital and Senate capital budget all include 22 million additional funding for the Brian Abbott Fish Barrier Removal Board. And so we fully expect that to make it in there. I'd say one little caveat, and I don't know if that was discussed yet, but there are some initiatives headed for the ballot in November. One of those initiatives will be to determine whether we maintain the Climate Commitment Act or not. And so we are seeing some language across some budgets where Climate Commitment Act is being appropriated, but it's got some language that, for instance, in our House capital budget with the additional 22 million for the Fish Barrier Board, it says null and void if the initiative should fail. So I did want to just acknowledge that we are seeing some of that language, and definitely there is conversations taking place, and people are aware of the initiatives and what could occur if that revenue was to go away. So Fish Barrier funding is good. Broadband funding, some good news and bad news. We are working on that, but I think we're in a good place. So we asked for kind of two areas of funding for broadband. One is we've got the 1.2 billion coming from BEAD grants. So we're trying to get ahead of that with state match. The House capital budget includes $11 million additional in state match, and it's not funded from the Public Works Assistance account, which was great. It's funded from the state building construction account, so we like that. The Senate did not include additional state matching funds, which, is not as good, but we're not concerned. We're really going to need those matching funds in the next biennium, so we're not too worried about that. The bigger question we have right now is with our request for broadband technical assistance for local jurisdictions. We've got a situation where in the Senate capital budget, we have language that we need that works for the technical assistance, but a number at 1 million, which is not really what we requested, or maybe enough to get as far as we need to. The House operating budget has a $2.5 million number, but the language doesn't work. And so we've been working over the last few days to get that corrected. I think we've made good strides with our partners at the PUDs, the cities, and the ports. And our hope now is that we've got language submitted to where it needs to go, and for the House operating budget to maintain that 2.5 million number with language that will work with the Department of Commerce to get funding out to us. So we're still working a little bit on the broadband technical assistance, but I think we're in a good position there. Transportation budgets, from my perspective, House and Senate are both in good places as well. They include maintenance levels of funding for the Transportation Improvement Board as well as the County Road Administration Board. They both extend our federal fund exchange pilot program, which was really important. We got that program started last year. It was only funded for 1 year, which was problematic for a number of technical reasons. And so both budgets, although they have language that does it differently, do extend to that program into 2027. So we're happy about that. Both budgets increased funding, although from the Climate Commitment Act, to bike and pedestrian and safe routes to schools programs. So we're supportive of that. The Senate budget includes what I think's hopefully it'll end up in the final budget, but it includes $375,000 for a Joint Transportation Committee study around streamlining project delivery for locals. We've been working on that. We gave a presentation in Senate Transportation this session on that, and I'm hopeful that ends up in the final budget, because I think we can work with our members locally in the public works departments and with WashDOT and some state officials on maybe looking at some ways we can kind of get through some of these project reviews and delivery faster. So we were happy to see that language in the Senate version. Paul, I think I will stop there. That's a lot of stuff. Hopefully I covered everything I was supposed to, but happy to take questions.
Thanks, Axel. Any questions? Commissioner St. Clair, go ahead.
Unmute. Thank you, Axel. I had a question. I was in a meeting this morning around transportation funding, and there was this, and the budget process, and there was conversation about ferries. But I'm wondering if you can unpack for me a little bit more the implications of the transportation budget, where there are significant differences between the House and the Senate budget. I'm not sure I fully understand what those differences are and what they mean for local government.
Yeah, and that's a good kind of tough question. I think probably the biggest areas of difference, just, you know, first reaction to that question, Commissioner, is they did have a lot of new Climate Commitment Act revenue to appropriate, right? So that's a fairly new program. It's been raising more money than they anticipated, and you have a chair on the House and chair on the Senate side working with their committee members on, you know, where should this go? So I think that's a natural first place for me to start to answer that question is you're going to have budgets roll out, and no matter how much they're communicating with one another, it's a new revenue source, and you can put that into new programs, right? So you might see some big differences there, and you just have to kind of, you got to get together after they come out and say, oh, this is where you put that new funding, and this is where we put it. And then you've got to really try to work together to prioritize, because, you know, you're not going to fund everything. So that's probably one big area. Another big area is, I think in Paul's update, he did a good job of talking about sometimes you'll have a policy bill that's moving along, but it needs that funding to come with it. So I think that's probably an area you'll see that happen, where maybe a bill will fail, but it will get pulled into a budget. And maybe there's, you know, differences of opinions as to whether that should happen or get pulled into a budget, or a bill passed, but how or where is it going to be funded from? But admittedly, I'm not an expert on how everything within this process works. But yeah, you're right. I think sometimes when the budgets come out, they're either closer or farther apart, and they have, you know, and I think maybe in this case, they have a little bit longer way to go to get there before the 7th.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay. Well, we're getting towards the end of the session. As we said before, there's less than 2 weeks to go. If you still are interested in coming to Olympia, or you've got business here, please, again, know that we're here to help. We can help you with testimony. We can help you with, you know, space to, you know, work away from home if you need some while you're here. We can, you know, if you need any assistance at all, just feel free to reach out. Our final legislative steering committees or committee meetings are coming up next week on Wednesday night for our roundtable, and Thursday for our final meeting. Please, if you're a member of the LSC, those are, especially the Thursday meeting, is a very important meeting, as we're going to be looking at our legislative agenda development process for the upcoming 25-26 biennial legislative session. So we're going to be making some decisions around how we're going to move forward in developing that legislative agenda. You won't want to miss that meeting. The second fiscal cutoff, as I mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, is on Monday. So 5 o'clock on Monday, bills have to be out of their fiscal committees from the opposite chamber if they are still going to be considered alive for the session. The next cutoff is on Friday. So the day after LSC will be here is the opposite house floor cutoff, or the second floor cutoff. That's where we know, you know, the bills have to basically be out of both chambers. The rest of the time will be spent on concurrence and, you know, getting things ready for sine die, which is the last day of session that we're expecting to be on March 7th this year. So things are moving really rapidly. We really are on the downhill end, really kind of at the bottom of the downhill end of the process. And we'll have more updates for you kind of as things move forward. We will have one more update that's virtual. That'll be the Friday after Sine Die. So that'll be coming up on March 8th, where we'll do a quick verbal recap before we do our printed version. That's all we have for you today. I can see it's getting pretty close to the 1 o'clock hour. There's our contact information if you need it. If there are no other questions, we will sign off and say, see you later. Have a great weekend, everybody.